Hi, Norma.
Hi.
Thank you for being here today.
Sure.
So let's start off by telling us what you do and why it's important for people to learn about it.
Yeah, most people know me as an integrative and functional nutritionist, but few know how I got here. I think it's an important story to share because it's a story of being misunderstood. My hope is that it sheds some light on better ways to support mental health challenges versus following the more difficult path that I did.
And when did you first feel misunderstood?
I actually started out as a happy kid growing up in the Great North Woods as my playground, but that all changed as soon as I started school, when I began to feel more unsure about myself. I could not understand why it was so hard to socialize, yet others made it look so natural and easy. In the classroom, I felt lost and struggled to pay attention. As focus became more difficult, I'd find myself rereading assignments, relearning material on my own. By fourth grade, I was staying up until midnight to finish homework. This continued into middle school and high school, and my family thought I was smart because I was studying long hours.
And how did that make you feel?
This cycle, it made my OCD and perfectionism stronger. And soon I was repeating math problems to ensure they were correct, or writing and rewriting assignments, and my artwork was so perfect I was accused of cheating, so I gave it up altogether.
How did you cope?
I was able to find solace in nature. Like I said, I was in the Great North Woods, and anxiety became a new feeling for me, and I felt nature was saving me. But that all changed in middle school when I started feeling more depressed and finding comfort in alcohol. And the drinking intensified in high school, often putting me in dangerous situations. My home life did not offer much reprieve, where tempers flared and financial stress was the norm. And then add 10 siblings to the mix, and I was pretty much on my own.
Was there anything that you discovered that helped you during this time?
My saving grace was finding sports as a healthier way to socialize and make friends, while also providing a distraction from the alcohol, for sure. Most importantly, it gave me confidence and offered a sliver of hope for a better future. And even after high school, I was admitted to UW-Madison, and I thought I found my ticket to freedom. But that is when my executive functioning became even more difficult to manage without the pressure of daily deadlines and more distractions living in a dorm. This was then accompanied by even heavier binge drinking, which brought on more trauma. I was in a downward spiral that led me to find control through food. And before the end of my first semester of college, I developed anorexia, which weakened me to the point of getting pneumonia. And my depression and anxiety became so overwhelming that I often contemplated suicide.
How did you survive? How did you get through this period of your life?
Well, I was lucky there was like that Thanksgiving break. That really gave me the break I needed, but I found that support was not good at home, and so I put all my focus into school. I was blessed to have a studious college roommate and kept me in line, and I really studied hard, totally immersed myself in my studies, and that diverted me from, using alcohol to cope. But upon graduating from Madison, I felt I had life figured out, moved to California, pursued a career in the pharmaceutical industry, but I worked long hours on weekdays. I partied heavily on weekends while my eating disorder got worse again. And I recall running excessively in the evenings as if running myself to death. And I couldn't understand why life felt so hard for me, and I was so unhappy. And I was so hard on myself, and I just didn't know if I could continue the game of life anymore. But then life presented yet another needed interruption, and it was at the command of my employer that I started therapy for the first time in my life. And The therapy had helped me process a lot of trauma, but I was still feeling anxious and depressed.
How were you able to shift out of that mindset?
Well, by the age of 27, I decided to shift my focus out of pharmaceuticals and into wellness. So I pursued a master's degree in nutritional sciences, and they were concerned that it was connected to my eating disorder, but I'd later discover it was a path to healing. But people-pleasing, perfectionism, controlling food, it was still prevalent, but it was a way that I coped to get through life and grad school. I earned a 4.0 GPA. I was voted the top graduate student, as well as the dietetic intern for the state of California. I had a supportive partner through all of this who helped me see the good side of myself, and we were married just after I graduated. So at 30, life was looking great on the outside, but it still did not match up to what I was feeling inside. I never felt like I was doing enough or achieving enough. There was always another challenge ahead. I always worked 2 jobs just to feel adequate. And it was interesting that the eating disorder patients found me at work, wherever I worked. And I realized that as I was helping them, I was gaining insight about myself. I noticed the same feelings of anxiety and depression in them, but also co-occurring problems of OCD, perfectionism, addiction. And many of these issues were independent of past trauma. And I was starting to contemplate the genetics behind the problems and behind those problems as well. And at the same time, I was experiencing more challenges at home. By 36, I was fortunate to have 2 children, but had developed debilitating migraines. And I was living in pain for half of each month, and my depression was deeper yet. And it was not until my second child was a toddler that I was stopped in my tracks. I saw myself in him, his temper, his OCD, his social troubles. I was recognizing behaviors that were genetic. I did not create the monster inside of me, and my husband was surprised to witness the same, finally. So, however, this also terrified me. How could I save my son from the same emotional and physical pain that I lived through every day?
So how did seeing these same tendencies in your son propel you on this journey?
By 38, I felt it was time to dig deeper. I spent 5 years and over $10,000 on various treatment modalities. And I finally found an acupuncturist that practiced orthomolecular medicine. And even after studying pharmacology, toxicology, and nutrition, I never knew about this approach of medicine, which uses nutrition supplementation to correct biochemical imbalances or deficiencies that are often genetic.
And what changes did you notice when you started supplementation?
I started supplementation and I noticed how my mental energy and chronic fatigue improved. I also learned how food sensitivities could cause inflammation in the brain to cause pain. I started to avoid foods that were triggers and reduced my migraines by 95%. At 41, I was finally feeling less pain, and my mood and focus improved more than ever before. It was truly miraculous, but also confusing.
And how did food influence your mood and pain that you were experiencing?
That question was answered at 42. I heard something on the radio that literally changed the trajectory of my treatment approach, both myself and others. I recall listening to an interview with a scientist from UCLA on NPR News that was part of the Human Microbiome Guts and Glory series. The UCLA scientist shared growing evidence that gut bacteria influence our minds. He shared that bacteria in our digestive system, referred to as the microbiome, help mold brain structure as we're growing up and influences our moods, behavior, and feelings as we mature. As he put it, it opens up a completely new way of looking at brain function and health and disease. After 10 years of treating eating disorders in private practice, I knew I was only hitting the surface. I decided to take a sabbatical and researched hundreds of probably thousands of scientific studies on the microbiome. And what I found was groundbreaking. I learned that we contain about 100 trillion microorganisms in our body. Most of these microorganisms live in our large intestine and are referred to as the microbiome or gut bacteria. And these microbes produce and regulate neurotransmitters in our brain. And this includes dopamine, which promotes focus and memory, as well as GABA, which is calming and helps us cope with stress, and serotonin, which improves mood to lower anxiety and supports memory and learning. In fact, over 90% of our serotonin production is regulated by gut bacteria. And these brain chemicals from the gut act in the brain via the vagus nerve, which connects the gut to the brain. And this is why the gut is now referred to as the second brain. And I think we need to look at the gut before we look at medication. You know, if that isn't enough, the microbiome not only impacts mental health, but it also regulates over 70% of our immune system, which includes inflammation and the associated pain. And this inflammation even affects emotional health. And our microbiome also regulates our own genetic expression and drives our metabolism. And there was so much that I was learning that the course of my treatment approach was changed forever. And at that very same time, my son's elementary school teacher was pointing out his disruptive behavior in the classroom and requested that I seek treatment for him. And I felt it was too early to be starting medication. And so I decided to apply what I was learning about the microbiome.
And where did that lead you next?
This led me to even more research on factors that alter our microbiome. And I not only found foods that support good microbes, but also food and lifestyle factors that cause harm. I think that was a bigger portion of what I was finding, and I was still searching for more answers to help my son. And I later found a book that had just been published in the spring of 2017 called Finally Focus, the Breakthrough Natural Treatment Plan for ADHD. And it was by Dr. James Greenblatt. And I noticed that his approach was very similar to orthomolecular medicine, yet this was a physician that had been applying it as a psychiatrist for 30 years, and he had clinical data to prove its benefit. And the information was fascinating, but I was actually becoming overwhelmed by the amount that I was learning. Like, how do I bring the microbiome and orthomolecular medicine together? And that's when I found the answer in 2018 at a conference of integrative medicine for mental health, and was amazed by the amount of clinical research that was available. Immediately after I began learning from the leaders in functional medicine and completed intensive coursework through the Functional Nutrition Alliance, their approach focused on identifying and addressing the root cause of disease or symptoms by considering genetics, the microbiome, food, orthomolecular medicine, and lifestyle as part of treatment. I finally found the approach that brought it all together. But our culture promotes achievement at all costs, and more vulnerable brains are getting hit hard. With increased academic pressure, there's excessive competition in sports, kids are getting less sleep, increased reliance on quick processed foods because families are in a rush, more time on electronic devices, so there's less time outside. And the result is poor gut health, and that contributes to scattered brains, less focus, more fatigue, lower motivation, greater irritability, and can even affect self-esteem and increase anxiety, depression, and hopelessness.
I think a lot of people can definitely see where you're coming from on this. What are some of the ways that you address these challenges?
Well, if we provide academic support and honor individual limits, because every kid is different and they learn differently, and then maintain activity in moderation and allow for those 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. Provide easy home-cooked meals and add supportive supplements, limit electronics to allow time for nature. The result will be improved gut health, better focus, increased energy and motivation, better mood, higher self-esteem, and more self-confidence. And it's not easy. The process takes time. You know, as a mom, I know the ongoing struggles of maintaining balance for ourselves and our kids, and I don't always enjoy cooking. But gradual shifts can lead to great improvements, and over time, and it's more than worth the effort.
So would you say there are limitations to Western medicine?
Well, I do want to be clear that I truly appreciate what Western medicine has done for this world. But integrative medicine is the best approach when we treat both root causes and symptoms. Too quickly, we choose medication without first looking at the source of the problem. And even when we do need medication, nutrition and supplements allow them to work better and have fewer side effects, because we're renourishing systems that become depleted or out of balance from the medication. And so this is why it's become my mission to treat problems where they start. And that is how you can truly heal. And for years, I've been applying functional medicine in my practice, one client at a time. But as I see the mental health crisis skyrocket, it's time to get this message out to the masses. And it's time we support our kids better and treat problems where they start. And it's my hope that I can shed more light on caring for mental health using a functional medicine approach.
That was very informative. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
And thanks for listening.